This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. This is the Thoughtful Travellers Book Club for May 2020. I have my excellent co-host Justin Watson here from Canberra again tonight. Thank you for being here, Justin.
No, thanks for inviting me back. I guess no one complained to get me off the show. So,
no one complained whatsoever. So, and it was really nice to have someone to talk to rather than just be nattering away to myself. So, yeah. So, welcome wherever you are in the world. It's 7 p.m. here in Perth and 9 p.m. where Justin is over in Canberra. And I'm hoping that that there's some people from Europe and even parts of North America able to join in on this time zone. I can see, now Margaret has already joined and said, hi, Amanda, only read 100 pages, but loving it so far. Now, Margaret works at the very library system that loaned me this book. So extra shout out to the special Margaret. So today we are talking about this exact book, Around the World in 80 Trains. It is a fabulous book. Now, I'm not sure, Justin, if you're the right co-host because you tend to agree with me on a lot of things. And what did you think about this book?
Well, given I recommended it, but I hadn't read it at that stage.
Yeah, it was risky.
And it was. And I think I got recommended by reading it in a travel section saying travel books out this month. And that's how I found it. And then I just hadn't bought it. But then when I read the book, I've gone, honestly, probably one of the best books I've read in the last few years. It was just...
yeah. I agree. Yeah.
I just love the language, her method of describing stuff. It was just great.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're probably biased towards liking it. This is my guess. Tell me if I'm wrong, because we're probably fairly like-minded in the way she travels and her outlook on thoughts about travel. And we both like train travel. So there's a couple of really, good points in its favour to start with.
Yeah. And I've not been on hardly any of the trains she's travelled on. So I've now got a list a mile long to go and explore. So.
Oh, absolutely. I've been on a few of them. The Trans-Siberian, she went through down to the Trans-Mongolian route. But yeah, so I recognise parts of that, and the Reunification Express in Vietnam, which really shouldn't be called Express. There was nothing express about it when I travelled on it at all. But apart from that, there's a few train journeys in there I am really, really keen to go on. So certainly whet my appetite.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you like train journeys, or you just like just a general feel-good sort of travel type story where nothing really goes terribly wrong, but they meet so many interesting... It's a lot about the people in the book and the types of people she meets and the interactions with them, and trains are ideal for that kind of stuff. People do all sorts of stuff on a train, and that book pretty much covers everything that could possibly happen on a train.
It does. I remember you sent me in your notes a particular point about where Monisha was mentioning the kinds of things that happen on a train. Do you remember what I was referring to?
Oh, yes. And I think she prefaced it by, given that she's of Indian heritage, she made a comment about how she's used to seeing sort of Asians on a train doing pretty much everything and anything, because they'll sell food, they'll cook. I've even seen people washing up on a train. And in this case, she was, fascinated and disturbed because someone was cutting their toenails.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a pretty good way of putting it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's culturally very interesting to see that these things can happen on a train, but I don't want the person next to me to be cutting their toenails and having them flick towards me particularly. But as you mentioned, it's a lot about the people that they meet on the train, and certainly that was my experience when I travelled across the Trans-Siberian. I really really relished every time that my cabin mates would change and I would have new or interesting people come in. Some of them didn't speak to me. Some of them had a lot to say. And you and I both loved that particular moment in the book when they were on the Rossiya traveling across Russia, and they had an unfriendly cabin mate, didn't they?
Yes. I think you get people who don't feel like they might sometimes feel embarrassed, like, you know how you talk to someone and say, oh, I don't speak English, and it might have been something like that. But, you know, they thought, oh, you know, I'll buy this nice man an ice cream and we'll try and open up a passage of communication, and to find he accepted the ice cream and then let it melt. So
I know, and it's just tragic because I really like ice cream, and I really felt
and it was
for
a good
her.
ice cream too.
And it was a Magnum, exactly. It was something really good. I really felt for her, imagining, you know, you've done the right thing and trying to, you know, create a little friendship here. He accepts the ice cream, but then he just lets it sit there and it melts, and it's just a little tragedy in a lack of human communication.
And I don't think you can take it personally.
No.
It's just some people are wanting, just when you least expect it, someone will want to become your friend on the train, and that's probably when you're like going yourself, you need some time apart. So
yeah.
You just
I remember
pick these things.
No, you really can't. I mean, I did have a cabin mate on the Trans-Siberian who came in and sort of grunted, especially when he realised we were not Russian. And then he pulled out a bottle of what I assume was vodka, went up to his top bunk, drank it, and then slept for like 2 days straight. Like I didn't ever notice him coming down, which was a bit disturbing. I could still hear him breathing, so I knew he wasn't dead. But, you know, he was so antisocial that he didn't want to speak to us or do anything. So you get all sorts, but, you know.
Well, you know, I've had the train ride. I think it was going to Prague from Budapest, and there was a guy on the train, and he made his own red wine, and he had quite a few bottles of it, and cracked one open. Neither of us could understand each other. We had a couple of people who occasionally, when they came into the cabin, kind of translated for us, but, you know, you could understand. He'd say, understand where you're from and all that kind of stuff, but he kept giving me a glass of wine. We kept drinking, and this went on for 5 or 6 hours, and so
I think when you have enough red wine, you both become like completely bilingual, and you can have a full conversation.
Yeah, so, you know, it's. I think everyone who's been on a few train rides like that has had an experience like that, and I think that's why people who do it really enjoy train rides. So
yeah, absolutely. So we both noted down a few parts of the book that really described why or what makes a long distance train ride a train ride. And let me just shout out to the people who are watching. Hello again, because there's a bunch of you, and I'd love to see in the comments, if you have already read the book, your favourite parts, or your favourite parts so far, Margaret, being only 100 pages in. I think you'll have passed the Magnum ice cream part already. So yes. We talked. I particularly liked how she described something that was not unique to her. It was also definitely the same for me. When I went on my longest train journey across Russia, I expected that I would spend hours reading because, you know, what wonderful captive time to read. And I thought, there's not much to look at outside. I'll just sit there and, you know, read. It'll be wonderful. And I only read one book in the whole time I was in Russia, which was like 2.5 weeks. And what Monisha wrote in the book was I thought it was just right. She said, delays were for reading, but while we were on the move, it was impossible to stay focused when there were so many conversations on which to eavesdrop. Or it took just one sneeze or a glance into a bag of crisps to miss black-tailed jackrabbits springing into holes and ground squirrels springing out of them. Like, there's so much going on out the window of a train.
Yeah. Even in the most desolate of places, which the Trans-Siberian would probably qualify as travelling through some pretty desolate landscapes. And I had a similar experience travelling on a train in Ethiopia just you know, in December. And out the window, you're looking out and it's a desert. There's nothing out there. And all of a sudden you see a family with goats or with camels or some huts. And that's before you even talk about the people that were on the train having a party. And
Exactly. Yeah.
So I didn't read much that day either. So
no, I just really related to that. I thought that's such a train thing. It seems like you'll have all this time, but you do have all this time, but life just changes. It's just a completely different way of being.
Bit like our lives right now in the world. Like
I was just thinking exactly that. Yeah. There is definitely some correlations between coronavirus and long-term train travel. It's a bit. Yeah. It puts you into a new mental space, I think, where you feel justified in slowing down. I suppose it's like an external force tells you can slow down, because when you're on a train for like 3 days, well, there's not much hurry, is there? So, yeah.
Nowhere to go, nowhere to be.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect. In fact, I'll just read one more quote that she wrote. She wrote that no other mode of transport combined my two favorite pastimes, traveling the world and lying in bed.
Yeah.
So that was perfect. Yeah. Like, that's exactly right. You can do both these things at once. It is the perfect world. So, yeah, I love that.
Although I think at one stage, didn't they get woken up at 6 a.m. for breakfast or something like that? So
yes, I remember that. I felt annoyed on their behalf too.
Yeah.
I remember when I was traveling across Russia, because that travels across I can't remember, 7 time zones. Anyway, numerous time zones, and the train would work on Moscow time, and so from Vladivostok it was very, very confusing. And then when things would happen, kind of kept changing. Like, I was trying to keep kind of my time on some kind of vague local time, so I knew when it would be dark and stuff, but it was very, very confusing. So sometimes things happened too early for me, but it was a feature of the crazy time zone stuff. So yeah. I just want to check, there was something else that I wrote. What you noted, Justin, while we're talking about like being somewhere in the middle of nowhere, like in Siberia, about being in the middle of nowhere, and we say that, and it's actually kind of an insult to the people who live there.
Yeah, I never thought about this until this book, and it was like, you're right. The middle of nowhere could be someone's home, could be, and they could be very proud of it. And even within Australia, we talk about, we'll go out. I mean, we'll say, or people will say, go out bush, as if, and that's because the Indigenous people live out there. So, yeah, I can see how some people could be insulted by it. I guess a lot of people probably enjoy, that's why they live there, is for that kind of lifestyle, being so isolated from the room. But yeah, it's she made an interesting point there, and something I hadn't actually ever thought about before.
Yeah, it's a good point. I agree. I think we have to be careful with our language like that, because it sounds like we're denigrating it when actually it's...
I don't think anyone means to denigrate it.
No, probably not. But yeah.
It's middle of nowhere is, to us, because we're used to having all the mod cons, but for others it's where they live, and they're perfectly happy with it. So
yep, absolutely. Sorry if you could just hear me twice there, because I was trying to be clever and see more comments and I failed and clicked the wrong button. But that's Facebook Live for you. Now, what else did we want to talk about? And we've just had one couple of comments here. So Margaret, one of the things that struck me was Sir Harold, the former British POW, who didn't believe in generalising, knowing that there were good Japanese people. Oh, yes, I noted that part too. I had a bookmark in there. Yeah.
And I think as thoughtful travellers, you kind of know that. Like, you can stereotype, but often the stereotype doesn't even mean the majority. It's just what's more sensationalist. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I
thought that was a really important point to see that again.
And governments don't always, and that's probably with getting on to, say, North Korea, the governments are not always reflective of the people.
Yes. I love the North Korea chapter. What did you think?
Yeah, look, it's kind of been a place I've been fascinated with. I do find it interesting, though, because South and North Koreans speak the same language, so they can understand each other. I wasn't aware that South Koreans were allowed to visit, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I find I'm not surprised. Like, I kind of had a bit of an idea that what it was like. I've read it a lot about it, but I'm not surprised that people there are totally in with their country and they don't see anything wrong with it. they may know that from the rest of the world thinks there's something wrong with the country, but they either don't see it the same way, or they don't agree, or they're okay with it because they don't, they just feel like people are criticising. There's probably numerous reasons, and I don't know that you'll find out. They're not going to answer that question. And
no, that's right. Yeah.
And that's what makes it so hard to know whether going there is supporting people or whether it's supporting the government. And that's
exactly. I've had the same debate. Yeah, with myself even, because I'm intrigued about going, but I wouldn't at the moment for sure.
No,
but still, it's.
I certainly wouldn't judge anyone for going.
Yeah. No, absolutely not. Yeah. I mean, a friend of mine went last year, maybe the year before now, and what bothered me the most was that she then was like completely off the radar. Like there was no internet, she couldn't be contacted, and she has kids similar age to mine, and that's the thing that I couldn't deal with. I couldn't go and think, no one can get hold of me in here. This is, it seems like it's a real black hole, and that kind of thing just kind of scared me. So, yeah, but interesting. Now, Philippa has also commented here, enjoying this discussion. Oh, yes, about the times on the Trans-Siberian. They keep the staff time and timetable on Moscow time, so it becomes quite odd once you are like 5 or more hours east of Moscow. So very true. Richie, welcome.
Yeah,
Richie.
is the timetable Moscow time?
Yes, I think it's Moscow time, if I remember rightly. And yes, that's what Philippa says. So yeah. Because I guess there has to be some kind of consistency, but it's very confusing.
Well, and China has a completely different problem in that everyone's on Beijing time. And if you go out to Urumqi, you're on the same time as Beijing, yet it's the same distance, say, Perth to Sydney. So,
So you're either getting up
certain times of the day, it's
dark or whatever, or it's yeah.
It
doesn't match up to what we expect for the time. Yeah,
no, that's right.
Right. So, yes. Now, Richie's spoken about the American part, the North American part of the journey, which was really cool. So Richie said, I like the part when they were traveling through America, and she noted the differences between the Amish community on one side of the aisle and another family on the other side, where the father was sinking his second can of course. She described it as a kind of metaphor for what has gone wrong with humanity, and I thought that was trains are such a melting pot of many things, he says. Yeah,
and I think she did a really good job with not judging people either. I think she kind of let the conversations. She documented what people said. So there were times when people were slightly racist or homophobic or somewhere in there, and she didn't judge them. She didn't say right or wrong. She just wrote down what they said and let people. But then, as I think I put in my notes, I really liked a little bit where I think the woman was going to her son's gay wedding, and that's what happens these days. And then she wrote just a little note, "Gem straight into his cutlery." It's just like,
yes, I'm not participating in this conversation.
Is there a metaphor there?
Or fiddling with my cutlery. Oh dear! But it's so true. Like, it's such an important part of traveling when you meet other people to, really refrain and hold back your judgment as long as possible. I mean, sometimes it's really hard, but, I think of when I lived in Japan, and I love so many things about Japan, but, for example, their attitude to women is not fabulous in lots of ways. But, in most of those situations, you're not going to change much by just biting back and saying, I disagree because blah, 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 because there's such a cultural divide.
No. Not people you come across. I think if you're living with people or you're working with people, then they're the ones that you're going to make a longer lasting connection in, and they're going to see the differences in values and opinions. But on a train, you're not there long enough.
That's right. Yeah.
You just enjoy, observe.
Yes, exactly. I think that's probably the best way. Now, while we're back on the American part of it, I just had a couple of things that I wanted to mention, because to me they're kind of very, I don't know, stereotypically American from what we imagine America is like. Yeah. And just a couple of things where she described it quite nicely. And they were on a train, and she said they were ready for one of those obtrusive American breakfasts that stood proud like an homage to type 2 diabetes. And, I mean, yes. I have been in the US, and I have been confronted by plates the size of my dining table full of food.
Oh.
And it's so hard not to eat it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I don't know how they make money at restaurants, because I remember getting a meal once, and I got it was just a steak or something, but I got a side of spaghetti and then a salad bowl, and then a loaf, almost what was like a loaf of bread, and there was probably something else. And I finished the salad, and I sort of half eaten the pasta because I didn't want to be rude or anything like that. And then out came another salad bowl, and then they restocked my bread, and then they brought me out another plate of pasta, and and I'm like going, I just don't know what they. I mean, now I look back and go, what did they do with that food? I hope it didn't go to waste, because it's just I've never come across that aspect. That aspect of American culture, I think, is quite unique. I've never come across it anywhere else, unless there's a place run by Americans in another country, and then you can kind of know. Then you go, oh yeah, this place is run by Americans.
Yeah, that's right.
Very generous with their serving size.
Yeah, that's right. The other part about that was, she said they were in the restaurant car in the Amtrak train, and she saw that the guests previous to her at the table, I think it was, or as they were nearby, they left their tips on the table in the restaurant car. And I broke out into immediate panic, unsure what the protocol was on a train trip. And that is exactly my feeling when I'm in the States. So often I find it really difficult. I don't know what to do about tipping. And I find that like immediate panic is exactly how I feel. I mean, I don't like the idea of tipping, but I'm prepared to do it when it's the right thing, when it's done. But then how and what, how much, so stressful.
And some of the issues I've had in the past was I've just arrived. Like I remember arriving in San Francisco, and I didn't have a lot of US dollars left on me. And so I went, and I kind of arrived late at night and went for dinner. And I kind of didn't, you look at the amount on the menu, and you kind of know how much. And then next thing you know, they're rounding things up, and they're adding state taxes. And so it's not just tipping, they're also adding taxes on top, which we're also not used to in Australia.
So, that's right.
Everything's inclusive in Australia, and and I think in a lot of countries, and that's why. So it's one of those things, and I guess it is quite confronting, which is kind of strange, because you kind of think there's a lot of cultural similarities there as well, but that's the one that I think stumps a lot of travellers who aren't used to it.
Absolutely. I just find it really stressful. I just wish they would tell me, now I'll tip this much and leave it here, or, whatever. Like, I don't know. I don't want to do the wrong thing.
It just needs to be up front on the menu.
Yeah. I'm fine with paying more. I just want it to be clear. That's my only thing. Yeah. So, oh, dear. Now, what else have we had here? Oh, Anuj says, Amanda, this may finally get me to read books. That's a big win.
That's always a good
I'm very happy about that. Hello, Joan. Joan says, found it eventually. Good to have you here, Joan. So that's, good. Excellent. Just keeping an eye on the comments. Look at me go.
And I mean, to be honest, the book club's got me reading books more frequently. So that's I guess, a good thing, because my pile of books is quite tall, and I wasn't reading them quick enough.
There's nothing like having a deadline, is there? So
yes,
it works for me too. I mean, it's purely selfish, this whole book club. Don't you worry. So yes. Now, I just checking my notes. There was another part that I really, really loved that I have to share about, because actually not on a train, but the way she described crossing the road in Vietnam, in Hanoi. Oh, yes. It was just so accurate and exactly my experience. I think you said the same, Justin. So let me read this section briefly. She said, Hanoi actually had the worst traffic in the world, almost a source of national pride. It was so bad that hotels offered guests instructions on how to cross the road, none of which worked. We had been standing at the side of the road for more than 17 minutes, trying to work out how and where to cross in what had turned into a real-life version of Frogger. Spot on.
And I think anyone who's been there knows now, you just pick a little bit of gap and just walk at a constant pace across the road and let them avoid you.
Exactly.
And probably best to wait for no cars as well, because cars are less able to get around you, but the bikes and the scooters, Yep,
100% my experience. Yeah, I know the first time I was in Vietnam was like 18 years ago or so. And so there weren't so many cars. There was
the same for me too.
A lot of bikes, and that was easier. And when I was there last year or the one before, I keep losing track of time, then that was much harder because there are a lot more cars. And I found it easier because you're right, the bikes just go around. So, yeah.
And it's when you stop, that's when an accident happens, because the bike is anticipating you going as constant speed. If you stop, all of a sudden they can't get around you.
Yep, exactly right. Yes, you have to be, like you described, consistent and
but I think it's
determined, predictable.
I do find it interesting because I think it's the thing that anyone who's ever been to Vietnam, and probably other parts of Southeast Asia, but Vietnam in particular, and everyone comes back and they all go, "Oh, how hard was it to cross the road?" It's like it's almost like an experience that you have to go to Vietnam for to have.
That's true, because you definitely can't replicate that anywhere here in Australia. Nothing like it. Not vaguely close. So, yeah. Margaret has an interesting point. She said, I'm interested to know if Monisha and Jem's relationship continued to be so good. I thought this trip would have really tested them, but she did see that they did get married. Well, I know, Margaret, you're only 100 pages in, so I won't spoil it for you.
No, I won't spoil it.
Yeah, so we'll say nothing. But it was
say anything.
It was lovely. Let's move on. And Richie says, I think I've gone from reading one book a year to one a month. Yay! Excellent. So that's good news too.
But I do have to say, though, I thought it was quite interesting because her partner hadn't travelled that kind of style before. And he seemed to just take, I think that he just seemed to take everything in his stride. And it was just like, I think she described him as the sort of person who's used to having 5-star hotels or something like that. And, there was not all of that in this trip. So,
no. I think that kind of a trip
I think the spoilers have already come through.
I was just going to say, I can see Joan and Philippa are providing some spoilers, Margaret. But I think that kind of a trip is a really good way to decide, is this the person I want to spend the rest of my life with or not? I think, it would be it could be a fairly make or break kind of a trip. They did go through a few hairy moments, and I think you really, it's a good test of character, I suppose.
Yeah, I think so. If you spend that time with someone, and I think she even mentioned, and I don't want to obviously spoil it too much, but they had that third person friend join them on the way back, and she even mentioned that helped her out with just having an extra person in there. Not so much that it was a third wheel to their relationship or anything like that, but just having another person. So, and I found that as well. If you travel with 3 people, it seems like it might not work, but every now and then someone wants a break and 2 people can go and do something and that third person can have a break. And other times all 3 will do something or everyone will split off. So I think it can be refreshing in that way.
Yeah, it can be quite a good dynamic, because when you're just 2 of you, then you do kind of feel like you've got to be together all the time, or it's just a bit less flexible. So, yeah, that's very true. Now, there's one more part that we both noted that was really interesting. And I think, was it mostly in China and Tibet, I think, where she wrote about travellers complaining about things being not authentic, like there being McDonald's and stuff.
Yeah. I think, and that was something I think I've seen a bit lately in this whole COVID-19 situation where people want to get back to travel and that. But, I think her point was that, we as travellers want to go and see things as traditional as they can be. And, and I think Japan's probably an example where it's a modern country, but it's still got a lot of its culture. But it's like Tibet was kind of, it's obviously had a lot of modernisation go on. And from a traveller point of view, you're like, oh, I wish it wasn't happening. You don't want to see the KFCs and the McDonald's around and things like that. But on the other hand, I think her point was she was, you're denying those people the things that we have back home. So you're not wanting them to modernise, and that often brings jobs and money and stuff like that. And of course, that means that the destination becomes more expensive for travellers. But you can't. It's
a very privileged position to be saying, we don't want you to change because we want to see the old ways. It is lovely, but so
But I think it will always, and I don't think it's always going to, it's not going to be that kind of way, because if you think, like even places like, people say like Vietnam's changed since, over 20 years, and it has, but it's still got a very unique Vietnam
Absolutely.
flavour to everything.
Yes.
So
they can't lose that. Yeah.
And I don't think they'll lose that. So I think, the modernisation, yes, you can avoid going to a KFC or a McDonald's or something like that, but you don't really want to be kind of denying those people,
the right to
that bring jobs to the area and bring affluence and give them more, a better lifestyle and, so.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting point, and I probably have thought about this before, but and I've had conversations with people in backpacker hostels, and you always get the person who wants to do it for as authentic and as cheap as possible, and they want to pay the same price as the locals pay and all that stuff.
It's a tricky one for sure, but I did like that she mentioned that a couple of times. Now, what else have I missed? Oh, we missed the robot hotel. They couldn't. I've never done that in Japan, and they couldn't get the lights off, or then the lights came on and they couldn't get them off, and and the check-in didn't work.
But it's not an uncommon thing. I've been in a normal hotel and gone, and you flick the light beside your bed, and next thing you know, it turns one light off, but everything else comes on. And,
I mean, yes, you're right. The more and yes. Oh, lights in hotel rooms that are more complex than they need to be, and all I want to do is turn all the lights off at once.
I'm sure
the hotels where they have like a one button at the bed that turns everything off at once. I love those places. So that's my ideal. So what else did we miss that we've got notes about? Oh, one more thing. I loved the in Tibet when she met the nun on the train.
Oh yeah.
And they're using WeChat to send messages to each other, and it reminded me. My friend Natasha, we were in Thailand 2 years ago, and we're up right in the north. And she got chatting when we were at this temple to a Buddhist monk. He was like what's the word? Kind of the boss monk, anyway. And they ended up becoming Facebook friends. And then she said to me afterwards, and he spoke good English, but she said to me afterwards that she suddenly for a while felt very self-conscious about what she posted on Facebook, because she knew her monk friend would see it. And so she felt she had to be more wholesome. So that reminded me of that when they met
it's
Tibetan nun.
Not much different to having your mother follow on Facebook.
Yes, that's true. Yes, exactly. My mum's not on Facebook, and I'm secretly very glad about it. So, And I can't say don't tell her, because she's not on Facebook, so she'll hear this when she listens to the podcast. Hi, Mum. But because when I put this audio through, unless I edit. So, anyway, moving right along, I think we have covered most of the bits that we loved the most. We definitely both agreed that this was a fabulous book.
I'll be reading her other book now.
Yes, exactly. You've got it there. Show us.
Which I do have it here, so I can show people.
Yep. So Around India in 80 Trains. So that was her original book. I think it was like 4 or 5 years earlier, if I remember rightly.
2010, I believe it was written.
Oh, right. Okay. No, earlier. Yep.
Yeah, I think 2010.
Right.
And she I don't believe she'd lived for long in India, like a couple of years as a 9 or 10-year-old. So
that's right.
In some ways, I think she was going back to explore. I don't know if she was born there either, but the country of her ethnic origins and explore that. So I'm sure it's going to be just as interesting.
Oh, I bet I'm really looking. I'm going to get hold of it too and read it as well. It looks great. So, and what have we got? A couple of comments here. Joan says, I love the amount of research that must have gone into this trip. And yet, she downplayed that side of things. I agree. And, looking back, you realize that she actually researched and planned well enough to coincide her visits at certain times, like the anniversary of the bombing in Japan. Was it? Yeah. Or there was anyway some anniversary. Was it the Hiroshima bombing or something like that? And a couple of other things where she managed to really, cleverly time it.
Time stuff in, yeah.
Yeah, despite the fact that it seemed
Korea,
kind
there
of
was something
random
going on as well.
Oh yeah, there wasn't there? There was some kind of anniversary celebration. Can't remember either, but
and Philip had also made a comment here about loss of culture as well, and I think that's probably more pertinent to. Yeah, so I think you don't have to lose your culture to to
modernise
modernisation. But obviously, there's a lot of political scenarios playing out here.
There, it's a really.
I think the same out in Urumqi out in the west of China is a similar.
Yeah,
they're similar to Tibet in that situation. It's a different culture there, but
yeah. The example you made earlier of Japan was very appropriate. I think they've managed to modernise and yet keep a really firm grasp of their culture, and that's what makes it so unique and such a fascinating place. So
I think most countries, it's what they should be aiming for, but.
But you're right. When it's more complex, and for example, the development is driven by the government instead of the locals and things like that, then it definitely gets more complex. All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. It's been lovely to follow your comments as well. And I want to invite you to join us again next month, because for June, can you believe it's June tomorrow? I can't. But for June, we are reading, can you see it? Eric Newby's A Short Walk in the Hindu Kush, which I started last night, and I got to bed very late because it was actually really lovely, quite funny. And I read it many years ago, to the point where I actually can't remember reading it. Like, I know I read it. I have this vague memory. But as I was reading it last night, it felt like a new book. So that's good.
That's good. And I've never read it, and I know nothing of the author. And all
he was mentioned in this month's book.
And all I knew, I do know where the Hindu Kush was, and so I know that bit. But so it's. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Yes, I think it's good to have
Once
some variety. But so fingers crossed. That's the problem for a lot of people at the moment. There's delivery delays, libraries have been closed, and all sorts of things. But in 80 Trains Around the World, Monisha Rajesh actually mentioned reading an Eric Newby book on her train to Washington, D.C. So I thought that was a beautiful link. If only I could link all the books from month to month like that, I would be a genius. But it was just complete coincidence. I didn't know it at the time. But there you go.
I think at least I think you said you picked November's book already. I'm assuming it comes out on time. So
yes, yes, that's true. I'll have to check that now, because I think there's lots of publishing delays this year. So maybe I'll hold on to that now and see. Yes, maybe next year, we'll see. But anyway, thank you, Justin, for coming along and hosting with me again. It's so much more fun. And thanks everyone who's been listening. And if you're listening back, I hope you enjoy our chat. And I really hope you enjoyed Around the World in 80 Trains as much as we did, because so far it is leading my Book of the Year poll, I think. And Justin, you'd probably say the same.
I think it was, and I think it was a definite nice change of tone in the book from the writing styles. If you compare the writing styles of Monisha and our previous, Paul Theroux book, completely different styles, and I think you probably get something out of that. I think some people might like one over the other, but
absolutely,
I definitely love this month's book. It was
just a pure pleasure to read. It was great. All right, well, thank you, Justin. Thanks everyone in Thoughtful Travellers Land. It's been lovely to spend some time with you this evening, and I look forward to catching up in June when we talk about our June book. So thanks, and we'll see you then. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.